Hello, welcome to Learner's Guide Tutorials. In this lesson, we are going to look at the characteristics of living organisms. This is Unit 1, Living Organisms and Life Processes. The general outcomes: develop positive attitudes and values about living organisms and life processes. Demonstrate knowledge and investigative skills. Key competencies: demonstrate the ability to prepare and examine specimen using a microscope. In the next lesson, we'll be talking about the parts of the microscope, the functions, and how to use a microscope. Show ability to carry out food tests from given food samples. This can come during your practicals, so you need to know the presence, the nutrients, and the foodstuffs where such nutrients are present or absent. Demonstrate the ability to investigate the conditions necessary for photosynthesis. Demonstrate the ability to investigate the composition of soil. So these are the things that we'll talk about at a later stage. So today we want to focus on describing characteristics of living organisms. So question come where they say describe. So first of all, you need to understand what does the term describe, the word describe mean. What are you required to provide as answers when you see the word describe? Okay, so to describe is to show in written words on the nature and appearance and attributes of something. The nature, what it is, okay, the appearance, how it looks like, the attributes, the characteristics of something. So sometimes you can also add the function. So let us look at an example of how we can approach the term describe. So example, describe a red blood cell. So reasoning, what are you supposed to organize as ideas that will lead you to providing a very correct, accurate answer. So describe the red blood cell. So we are going to look at the nature, what it is, the appearance, the shape or the color, character, what it is and what it does, then the function. Okay, character meaning characteristics, what features does it have, then the function. So the best answer can be a red blood cell is a red biconcave cell which transport oxygen to all parts of the body. So in this description, we have named the red blood cell. It's a cell, that's the nature, the shape biconcave, appearance biconcave, character red or appearance, then function to transport oxygen to all parts of the body. So like this, I've described the red blood cell. So in a similar way, when you are told to describe the characteristics of living organisms, so make sure that you talk about the nature, what it is, okay, you talk about the appearance. Not all will be applicable, of course, but you should think in those lines. Okay, what it is, meaning the nature, you provide a definition for these characteristics of a living organism. It's a definition. So if it's not something that can be stated in its form, the definition can be the nature, appearance, other things will be omitted, the character and the function. So these should be taken into consideration. Then let us look at the description of characteristics of living organisms. Describe the characteristics of living organisms. So the first one of great importance before we proceed, although it's not considered as one of the characteristics of living organisms, they are cells. So all living organisms are made up of body cells. So anything that is made up of cells, any cell, it is a living organism. Even if it's a single cell, it's a living organism. I'll give an example of a stone. A stone doesn't have cells, but a plant has cells. Examples of plant cell is the palisade cell, the sponge cells. Okay, those are examples of plant cells. The root hair cell. So a stone doesn't have such. So this is how you organize ideas. A frog has cells. Okay, so we look at now the 7 characteristics of living organisms. There are 7: movement, feeding. Feeding can be termed as also as nutrition, growth, excretion, irritability, which can be called also as sensitivity, reproductive or reproduction, breathing. So let us now describe each of the following characteristics one by one. So movement. So since there is no nature here, the description or the definition will be of great importance. So movement, this is the process by which a living organism changes its location and posture without external help. I'll give an example. Change of location. A human being posing for a photo. You touch your waist, that is posture. You sit, that is posture. You lean forward, that is posture. But movement is when you move from point A to point B, from where you stay to town. If you are walking, okay, that is change of location, that is movement. But what you should understand is that this term refers to both types of organisms like animals and plants. But in case of animals like a human being, we use locomotion when they move the entire body from one point to another. So the difference between movement and locomotion is that locomotion is the movement of entire organism from one place to another, that is locomotion. And the organisms that locomote, they have locomotive structures. They have got features that help them to move. For example, a human being has legs. A bird has wings to make it fly and legs to walk when it's on land. Okay? The fish has the tail and fins, which helps it to swim underwater. So that is, they've got locomotive structures. Okay? A frog has legs, which enables to jump up and down, to move. Okay, but a plant doesn't have locomotive structures, so there is no locomotion in plants. Plants just move a part of the body, not the entire body, and this is in response to stimuli. For example, seedlings that have germinated, they can grow towards the source of sunlight if they are obstructed, and that plant will grow bend. It will be bent as it grows. Growth. This is the permanent increase in size, mass, number of cells, and complexity of an organism. So what this really means is that increase in size. Okay, a baby is young, the baby grows, becomes taller. Okay, that is increase in size. The mass puts on weight, becomes fat. Number of cells, meaning a human being came from just 2 single cells. Sex is the sperm cell and the egg, the ova, from the female, the sperm from a male. So those are single cells, and then they join together, they start multiplying in different types of cells, and it grows. So that is the number of cells increasing. And also complexity from a simple sperm cell, from simple sperm cells, the sperm and the ova, you have now this human being with a lot of structures, with a lot of body parts. So that is the meaning of complexity. Respiration. This is the release of energy from food substances inside living cells. So respiration takes place inside living cells, in the cell, okay, and not outside. So there are two types of respiration. Aerobic respiration is the release of energy from food substances inside living cells in the presence of oxygen. So key word, release of energy, okay, from food inside living cells in presence of oxygen. Anaerobic, this is the release of energy from food substances inside living cells in the absence of oxygen. So these are the key important differences. The rest is the same. Both they release energy from food substances inside living cells. One is in the presence of oxygen, while the other one is in the absence of oxygen. So when they tell you to distinguish between aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration, get the definition, the two definitions, you join them by the word wow or whereas. So we can say aerobic respiration, this is a release of energy from food substances inside living cells in presence of oxygen, while anaerobic respiration is the release of energy from food substances inside living cells in the absence of oxygen. Difference number 2. Aerobic respiration produces more energy, yields more energy than anaerobic respiration. So the simple reason is that where there is sufficient oxygen, there is complete combustion and more energy will be produced. Where there is less oxygen, too much carbon dioxide, there will be less there is inadequate oxygen which is supposed to support burning. So less energy will be produced because the oxygen is little. Number 4, feeding, which is termed as nutrition. This is the process by which living organisms obtain food. So there are two types of nutrition. We have autotrophic nutrition. This is the type where organisms make its own food, e.g. green plants. So you should be able to define and give example. Again, they can tell you to distinguish autotrophic nutrition from heterotrophic nutrition. So you get the two definitions, you join them by the word wow. Okay, so autotrophic nutrition is the type of nutrition where an organism makes its own food, for example green plants, while heterotrophic nutrition is a type where an organism takes food present in other in the body of others or other organisms. For example, a human being, animals like cattle, okay, they feed, they do not make the food in their own bodies, they just get food from the environment, while plants, they make their own food using carbon dioxide, water in presence of sunlight, and chlorophyll to make complex food substances called carbohydrates or sugars. Reproduction. This is a process by which living organisms produce their young ones, offsprings. There are two types of reproduction. Sexual reproduction. Offsprings are produced by fusion of male and female gametes, sex cells, one from one or two parents. So from a man you have a sperm cell, from a female you have the ova or ovum. So the offspring produced, they are not genetically identical. They don't look alike, although there are some resemblances, but not completely. Asexual reproduction, the offspring produced from one parent without involving any gametes and genetically identical to the parent or each other. I'll give an example of cassava. Cassava, the way they produce cassava, you just cut the stems and you plant, okay? It will start shooting, and the cassava that you plant from different stems, they will look the same. Sweet potatoes, they just cut runners and then they plant, okay? The leaves of sweet potatoes, they're identical, okay? But for human beings, you may resemble your father, maybe to be your mother to be light in complexion, but you resemble your father being tall or short, but you are not looking exactly as your father or your mother. So that is the characteristic of sexual reproduction. While characteristics of asexual reproduction, the offsprings, they look identical to their parents. Okay, they are genetically identical. So here also this may come on section B, where I'm sure in 2022, this question came, differences, characteristics of asexual reproduction. So you need to take interest in this. They can tell you to distinguish, to differentiate sexual reproduction from asexual reproduction. So the first difference in biology is the definition. Okay, so you can talk about in sexual reproduction, offsprings are produced by fusion of male and female gametes and are genetically different from their parents. While asexual reproduction, the offsprings are produced from one parent without involving gametes and genetically identical to the parent or each other. Then excretion. Excretion is the removal of toxic metabolic waste from the cells of the body, such as urea, excess salt, excess water, biopigment, and carbon dioxide. I want to emphasize one point on excretion. Most people make a mistake. When they tell you to name substances that are excreted, okay, you don't say water and the salts. That is very wrong, because these two components, they are needed in the body most of the time. When you talk about water, you have to tell the examiner the following are substances that are excreted: excess water, excess salt, above normal. What is above normal is what is removed, because once you remove water in its entirety, the person will go into dehydration and will die. The cells will die. If you remove excess, you remove all the salts, how will the muscles contract to enable you locomote, to move from one place to another? Okay, you have muscle cramps because of absence of salts. So when you are talking about salt and water as substances that are excreted, you say excess water, excess salt. But for urea, it has to be completely removed from the body. So urea, you just say urea is excreted. But for water and salt, you say excess salt and excess water is excreted. Carbon dioxide, everything has to be excreted. Although in terms of respiration, not all the carbon dioxide come out, but it's not needed compared to water and salts. Irritability as the seventh one, which can be termed as sensitivity, is the ability to detect and respond to stimuli, singular stimulus. What is a stimulus? A stimulus is any change in the environment to which causes response from an organism. So coldness is a stimuli, it's a change in the environment. When it's cold, you put on pullovers, you put on jerseys, you put on something warm, you cover yourself, you add more blankets if it's at night. So the coldness is a stimulus, it's the change in the environment to which you, an organism, a human being, responded to. Okay? So a stimulus is any change in the environment which causes a response from an organism. If it's hot, okay, you remove excess blankets, you put on light clothing, okay, you put on something that is light, okay, so that you you overcome the hot environment. You put on the fan, okay, you switch on the aircon when it's hot. So that is hotness is the stimulus, is the change in the environment to which enables you to respond. So anything that will prompt you to do something, okay, is a stimulus in the environment. It's a stimuli, plural, singular, stimulus. The last one, although is, as I said, is not considered as this one of the 7 characteristics of living organism, but is of great importance. Here, they are cells. So cells are basic functional units of living organisms. That's the best definition. Some organisms are made up of single cells. Examples of organisms that are made up of single cell is bacteria. A bacteria is an organism that is made up of a single cell. So Such organisms that are made up of one cell are called unicellular organisms. So they can tell you to define unicellular organisms. You say unicellular organism, this is an organism that is made up of a single cell. Other organisms are made up of many cells, e.g. fungi, plants, and animals. Such organisms are called multicellular organisms. Multi means many, a lot, more than two, multi. So multicellular organisms are organisms that are made up of two or more cells, a lot of cells. Then we look at the next also important terminologies that you're supposed to know. We are done with 7 characteristics of living organisms. Metabolism and metabolic reactions. Definition. Metabolism, this is a sum total of chemical reactions that take place inside living cells. So there are two types of metabolic reactions. One, anabolic reaction. Anabolic reactions are metabolic reactions where large complex molecules are made, synthesized, are made from small and simple molecules, e.g. photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, plants make use of carbon dioxide, which is a simple molecule. Carbon dioxide, water is a simple molecule, okay, to produce carbohydrates. So that is anabolic, building up, okay, from small simple molecules. Protein synthesis in the same way, synthesis of fats in the same way. Okay, we'll talk about molecules and how they are built in the next lesson when we start talking about nutrients. You see how these molecules are built. Then we have catabolic reactions. These are metabolic reactions where large complex molecules are broken down in simpler molecules, e.g. respiration and digestion. Once you eat cassava, that cassava has to be broken down. So digestion will start from the mouth. You break, you chew using your teeth, and it goes inside there. And then we have an enzyme, salivary amylase, which acts on uncooked starch. Then it goes inside there, okay. In the stomach, we have acidity there. So in the duodenum, pancreatic juices are secreted to complete the digestion, so that you have a simple molecule, which is glucose. Glucose is coming, a single molecule is coming from carbohydrate, which is a complex molecule. So you see also how this process is. So what I want you to focus on, you should know the difference between anabolic reaction and catabolic reaction. So the differences, as I have stated, starts from the definition. So anabolic reactions are metabolic reactions where large complex molecules are synthesized from small simple molecules, for example in photosynthesis, while catabolic reactions are metabolic reactions where large complex molecules are broken down to simpler molecules, such as in respiration and digestion. You get full marks for doing that. So finally, now we look at the memory keys, mnemonics that can help you to remember the 7 characteristics of living organisms. We have the first one is Mr. Griff, sadness, Mr. Griff. Then we have Mr. Nigger, Mr. Graphic. So these can be used to remember the 7. When you remember the 7 and you write something on each, you score marks. But if you forget, you remember 2, you risk failing. So how do you remember? How do you recall? So Mr. is in each memory key. M, movement. R, respiration. For Mr. Griff, G, growth. R, reproduction. I, irritability, which can be also termed as sensitivity. E, excretion. F, feeding, which can be called nutrition. Okay, then the additional one is cells. We go to Mr. Nigger. Mr. is the same for everything. Nigger, nutrition, which is the same as feeding. G, growth. R, reproduction. Okay, we go to Mr. E excretion. We go to Mr. graphic. Mr. is the same for everything. G growth, R reproduction, then E excretion, F feeding, I irritability or irritability, C additional cells. So this is how you remember. I'll send these notes in the group so that you can copy. Okay, others you can photocopy. If you want, you can print out. Thank you so much for your attention. In the next lesson, we'll be talking about the differences between living organisms and the non-living things. Thereafter, we'll start talking about cells. Thank you so much for your attention.